I'm John Dickerson, and this is Washington Unplugged. This afternoon, the Justice Department will release a voluminous report on interrogation techniques used during the Bush administration. The account includes details from an unreleased 2004 CIA Inspector General inquiry that found evidence of brutal treatment of suspected terrorists, including mock executions. The White House confirmed Sunday that they will set up a team of interrogators to review these cases. To discuss this, I'm joined by Bob Baer, a former CIA case officer and author of The Devil We Know, Dealing with the New Iranian Superpower, and CBS News national security consultant, Juan Zarate. Bob, I want to start with you. What's your reaction to this report? It's not out yet, but what do you think this will do to the CIA? Is this a good thing this is coming out?
Well, it can't be a good thing. It will further demoralize the CIA, no question about it. But on the other hand, I don't see how we can avoid releasing reports like this and going ahead with a special prosecutor. If laws were broken, people need to be prosecuted. I just don't see a way around it. Look, the military during the times of war has court-martials, and it doesn't destroy the military, so why shouldn't the CIA live under the same system?
Juan Zarate, what do you think about this? Should the report be kept classified?
Well, I think in general you want to keep classified reports that were intended to be classified under wraps for as much time as possible. That said, I think Bob is right that when you have issues like this of national import, there's going to be not only pressure to, but probably a desire to get this out. And especially when there's a question as to whether or not a prosecutor should be named, that is a point at which you need full information out in the public sphere. So I think that's fine. I think Bob is right, though, in terms of morale for the CIA. This is yet another in a series of reports and issues that have come out. Recently, the reports of Blackwater having been used to help build CIA capacity. And I think this just further demoralizes the CIA. And it also leads them to question, what happens when political winds change? Can they rely on prior policies, prior legal guidance when engaging in activities? And I think this is a real crisis moment for the CIA.
Bob, what about that? The idea that you, as a former field officer, you're out there, and do you have to always be now looking over your shoulder that when the political season changes in Washington, you may get in trouble?
Well, I myself was investigated for the attempted murder of Saddam Hussein. I was brought back. My office was yellow taped by the FBI. I was polygraphed by the FBI. It certainly didn't help my morale. But on the other hand, I stayed on the right side of the law. I was exonerated, and I went on to other assignments. There's no reason that the CIA should be above the law in any aspect. It does its best work when it obeys American law.
Juan, I want to ask you a question about this new system being set up by the White House to oversee high-profile detainees. It's going to be run by the FBI, overseen by the NSC. Do you see anything interesting in that structural situation?
I think there are two interesting things about that. First, obviously a clear break with prior policy to make sure that the FBI is leading the charge. That sends a signal that there are going to be clear legal parameters and experts doing the work of interrogation, especially of high-level detainees. I think what's interesting as well, and time will tell how this works out, having the National Security Council and the White House on top of this, or at least guiding it, is potentially problematic. The White House tends not to want to get into operational matters. And if you have a structure where the FBI head of this or the FBI director has to come to the White House or the National Security Advisor to get advice as to what steps to take, particular operational steps in an interrogation, that really starts to get dicey for the White House politically and starts to meld the operational with the political. And so time will tell as to how this works, but I think they'll want to keep this in the FBI channels and with this new team of experts they're putting together.
And Bob, what's your reaction to this new system the Obama administration's put together for overseeing these high-profile detainees?
I agree with Juan. I think it should be in the FBI's jurisdiction. The FBI has done very well since 9/11. It never went over the line. It got a lot of good information. It, as I said, followed the rule of law, and putting professional FBI interrogators with lawyers in the same room with a suspect, it can only serve us well. I mean, I totally agree with the system. Now, putting the National Security Council, I also agree with Juan. You might politicize it, I think, rather than just put it under the FBI director, and we'd be just fine.
let me go back to the question of these previous interrogation techniques. If a special prosecutor is named, one of the arguments against going back and having a thorough look back, indeed the President and Dick Cheney sort of agree on this, is that it not only decreases morale, but it means everybody has to spend their time answering questions and investigations. Bob, what's your feeling about that? When your office was yellow taped, it's not only depressing, but it's also hard to get in and do your job.
Exactly. Well, it does, of course. But on the other hand, we've been through this so many times. We have political scandals in Washington where the White House has been tied up. Let me just look at Watergate or the My Lai massacre. These investigations do go on, and I think at the end of the day, we're better off for it, that we're a system that can look into itself and figure out what's right and wrong, and for the rest of the world, too. It's a good thing. We simply can't go out around the world and advocate human rights when we don't do it at home.
Juan, one question. Go ahead.
John, I was just going to add, I think the big challenge for the Obama administration is not doing what Bob's talking about, which is appropriate, but more so trying to contain the effects of this. Because I think one of the things that happened with the release of the prior Department of Justice OLC memos was the fact that President Obama wanted to contain the impact of that. And the reality is, both politically, legally, and internationally, it gets very hard when these documents are out there, when there's an independent process underway, to actually contain, either politically or otherwise, the impact of that kind of an action. And so I think the President wants to look forward, but these kinds of things, rightly or wrongly, drag you into looking backwards. And it will fuel a number of debates that have been festering for some time.
Well, it also appears that in this investigation, the President tried to quarantine it and say, well, anybody in the CIA who carried this out under orders should be held harmless, so to speak, but maybe Holder can go after some of the higher-ups. But in this case, there seems to be some question about whether people operated even outside of the Bush administration memos. So it seems to have opened up that can of worms that you're talking about. One other question I wanted to ask you is that the Bush administration officials, in fact, President Bush himself makes the case that we all need to remember what the mindset was at that time, the kind of frenetic effort to get information out of these detainees, and that should sort of moderate our views about the behavior that people participated in. What's your view on that?
Well, I think that's an important point. I don't think it excuses criminal behavior, and I don't think that argument sort of blankets, gives a blank check to those who want to commit criminal acts. That said, I think the former president is absolutely right. 2009 is not 2001. People need to remember that in that period between 2001 and 2003, there was a lot of effort to try to get more information about what al-Qaeda was planning, what its networks looked like. More people were getting wrapped up then. Guantanamo was set up to put a lot of those individuals into custody. We're in a different point now. We know much more about al-Qaeda. It's been diminished in large respect in terms of its leadership. And frankly, we're not picking up quite as many high-level individuals anymore. In fact, when we come in contact with them, usually they're killed. And so I think that's an important point, that we're in a very different position with respect to the enemy, with respect to our ability to contain it and defend against it in 2009 versus right after September 11th, 2001.
Bob, for you a question. One of the debates we'll be having in the coming days will be whether the fruits of these interrogation techniques were worth the effort. Is that even, what's your view of that debate? Of course, Vice President Cheney says, well, there was lots of good evidence that was found. What's your reaction to that?
Well, that's still the core issue here, is did it work? Nothing that I've seen suggests that torture got us better information than the FBI got from interrogating the same individuals without torture, without abusive techniques. That is a very important question. I'm not sure a prosecutor is the one to look at it, but somebody on the outside, other than the CIA or the FBI, needs to look at the results of these interrogations and decide what we do the next attack, because there will be another attack, and we have to know whether this was all a waste of time or it made us safer.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Thank you for joining us. Juan Zarate and Bob Baer, thank you for watching Washington Unplugged. Join us weekdays at cbsnews.com at 12:30 p.m. I'm John Dickerson.